This is the American Federation for Children, and we are a national organization dedicated to helping families get out of really bad situations in underperforming public schools. School choice is, I would call it a national movement that is really used to take the resources that are available for educating our kids and using those resources based on what works for each child. And so it's very important because, families should have the opportunity to choose the type of education that their children receives. They should have the opportunity to use the resources to have better outcomes.
I think it's the most important issue for America. Think about it. All children should have equal access to a high-quality education. Unfortunately, we know that many kids do not. Here in Louisiana, there's been a big challenge in terms of making sure that all the kids get the education they deserve. But the only way to do that is through school choice. You've got to have higher options. If the only option that most school kids have is their neighborhood school, which may or may not work, that's not a good thing. But in Louisiana, with the advent of school choice over the past several years, particularly in New Orleans, there's been an explosion of opportunities, and the results have been positive. So school choice matters because it's the greatest issue facing this country, making sure we're all educated. In Louisiana, it's a direct link to a meaningful work life.
I want to thank each one of you that came here tonight as a concerned citizen, a business leader, a legislator, an educator, or a parent, regardless of your political affiliation, who you caucus with, or whether you identify as a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules in life to join us to hear a little bit about what the American Federation is doing here in Louisiana to advance the education revolution. Our goal is to put parents back in charge of their children's education. We're here tonight to discuss how we can improve Louisiana's K-12 system through systemic and sustainable policy changes. Here to start off our evening is one of our founding board members and our executive counsel for the American Federation for Children, Mr. Kevin Chavis. Mr. Kevin Chavis helped to shepherd in the charter school movements in our nation's capital. Under his Education Committee chairmanship, the DC charter school system became one of the most prolific charter school systems in our country, with over half of the public school children attending public charter schools. In addition, he assisted in shaping the district's three-sector partnership with the federal government that shepherded in $60 million in annual federal dollars for DC's public schools, public charter schools, and the first federal scholarship program that provided access to private schools for nearly 6,000 low-income children. In recent years, Mr. Chavis has worked to advance this charter school movement around the country, particularly in jurisdictions including in Louisiana and Tennessee. We're so lucky to have this education revolutionary here tonight to share his knowledge and to moderate the discussion. Please welcome Mr. Kevin Chavis.
As Mandy said, we're very proud at the American Federation for Children because our mission is quite simple. We want to make sure that each and every American school child has equal access to a high-quality education, and we're particularly focused on the least of us, who we know can be the best of us if we give them an opportunity. So we go to very great lengths to work in various states like Louisiana to help design laws that work for children, help elect the right people who will make a difference to implement those laws, and then make sure we get the word out so that everyday citizens, everyday mothers and fathers can take advantage of the opportunities. We've got several people in the room that have been really helpful and been beneficial to parents because of their support. You're going to hear from a couple of them tonight who are candidates for office. But I want to emphasize one thing. Even though you're going to hear from politicians, and I can say that because I'm a recovering politician, okay? I can say that, so there's no insult. There's no Republican or Democratic way to teach a kid how to read, write, count, or compete. And one thing that I'm very proud of as I've come to Louisiana, and Senator Cassidy and I were talking about this earlier, is that you all have led the nation really in showing that, because the education revolution that we're here tonight to celebrate here in Louisiana has been a largely bipartisan effort. And for that, you should give yourselves a round of applause. So the format's going to be pretty simple. We have two of the gubernatorial candidates, and I will call each of them up one at a time. I'm going to read the bios for them and then call them up, have them say a few words about their commitment to the education revolution we see here in this state, ask them a couple of questions, and then y'all can have at them. No, just kidding. No, it won't. No, it won't quite be like that. And the first one, I will show my youth by pulling out my glasses. And the first one I want to introduce to you, who needs no introduction, is Lieutenant Governor Jay Darden. As Louisiana's Lieutenant Governor, he has led the state's tourism efforts to 3 consecutive record-breaking years. After taking office in the wake of the BP oil spill, he introduced the Louisiana Pick Your Passion campaign, which helped overcome challenges created by that disaster. The Lieutenant Governor heads the Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, which includes the State Museum System, the State's Park System, the State Library, the Arts, Historic Preservation, Seafood Promotion, Marketing Board, Volunteer Louisiana, and Tourism. He has chaired 2 major initiatives sponsored by America's Wetland Foundation, Building Resilient Communities, and the Big River Works. Prior to his election as Lieutenant Governor, he served 4 years as Secretary of State, 15 years in the State Senate, and 3 years as a Baton Rouge Metro Councilman. In fact, the Lieutenant Governor is a Baton Rouge homeboy in every sense of the word. He graduated from Baton Rouge High School, Louisiana State University, and the LSU Law Center. He is a member of the LSU Alumni Hall of Distinction, Baton Rouge High School Hall of Fame, and the Manship School of Mass Communications Hall of Fame. He has been married to the former Kathy McDonald for 32 years. They have 2 grown sons, John and Matthew. Please join us in welcoming Lieutenant Governor Jay Darden.
Well, thank you. Welcome to my 124th day of acting governorship in Louisiana. Our governor is out of town once again, and when he's out of town, the Constitution says that the Lieutenant Governor is the acting governor. If this keeps up, and I think it will, I'll be term limited before Inauguration Day. I'm glad to have a chance to visit with you tonight. You heard I spent 15 years in the Senate, and during the entire 15 years I was in the Senate, except for a brief 3 or 4 month hiatus, I served on the Senate Education Committee, Conrad. I was removed by President Sammy Nunes because I was stirring up a lot of trouble in my first term against the Edwards administration. That was the perceived punishment, was to remove me from the Education Committee, but things got worked out and I went back on it. So for all 15 years I was in the legislature, we were focused on education issues and educational challenges. I also was very involved during those times on ethics bills, and I want to tell you this story because it leads to what happened. In my first term as a state senator, I had a huge package of ethics reform bills, many of which have become law, but did not become law during my first term when Governor Edwards was the governor. I can vividly remember presenting my bills to the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee, which I chaired during the next term, but appearing before that committee and hearing the chairman of the committee look at me and say, Senator Darden, you want us to kill your bills all at once or take them one at a time? And I said, Mr. Chairman, take them one at a time. And they killed them one at a time. But we managed to make some progress in that second year towards significant ethics reform. And the point is, in Education Committee, during my time there, we were building the groundwork for what happened shortly after I left the Senate and got elected to a statewide office. We didn't do everything that has gotten done over the course of the past 8 years, but I think the groundwork was laid during that time. And I congratulate all of you because you've all had a key role that you've played in the evolution of choice in Louisiana and the evolution of progress educationally in K-12 education. I'm a big supporter of what you're doing with choice and with vouchers in Louisiana and obviously with charter schools. I look forward to the opportunity to continue leading in this area as Louisiana has made so much strides over the course of the past 8 years. And it's one of the things that I do point to during this administration that has led to a sea change in the way we view education and the way the people of Louisiana, I think, are now coming to expect progress to take place in education. So I thank all of you for the role that you've had in making this happen. I'm excited about the prospect of being able to work with you, and I look forward to answering whatever questions you may have. I tried to take my educational interest with me in my statewide offices. As both Secretary of State and Lieutenant Governor, we have created 3 different curriculum that was presented to Bessie and approved for teaching in K-12 education in Louisiana. That's with no additional staff and not hiring anybody, any kind of consultants to do this. We had people on staff, and I had a personal role in it myself in developing these programs. The first was a character education program based upon the life of Coach Eddie Robinson. When I was Secretary of State, we built the Eddie Robinson Museum in Grambling, Louisiana. And Coach Rob was truly one of a kind. Having the same job, working for the same employer, and married to the same woman for 57 years. That's something that's never going to be duplicated again, I don't believe. Certainly not in our lifetime, and maybe ever. But Coach Rob's character traits have been converted into a character education program for Louisianians that Bessie has approved and teachers are now implementing. We also had educational programs centered around our state's bicentennial, which we celebrated, of course, in 2012, and around the anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans, which obviously we celebrated earlier this year. Those curricula are now available for K-12 students in Louisiana. And it's something I felt very strongly about because both of these jobs had educational components to them, but they had never contributed to the educational life of Louisiana. And also, it's been a great pleasure of mine to work extremely closely with George Rodrigues Foundation and A+ Schools and putting a focus on educational achievement and bringing the arts and the importance of the arts into education. We talk a lot about STEM, and I'm a huge supporter of STEM education, but I'm also a supporter of STEAM education and recognizing the importance of training in the arts. And if any state ought to celebrate its legacy of arts and artistic individuals, it's the state of Louisiana. And so it's very important that a foundation like that flourish and have the support of governmental leaders as well. And I've been very privileged to lend my support to that foundation both before and after George's unfortunate passing. But thanks for giving me the opportunity to visit with you a little bit tonight. Senator Cassidy, I'm sorry I can't stay for dinner. I'm not walking out on you, but I got to get back to Baton Rouge. But I'm glad to have the opportunity to visit with you this evening. I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
Sure. Let's give him a hand. Thank you so much. And Lieutenant Governor, I will be asking just you a couple of questions of you and also Senator Vitter. But beforehand, you did mention him, and I'm going to take the moderator's privilege and give a shout out to Senator Arpel. He's been one of our champions of choice in the legislature. Thank you so much for your leadership. You mentioned how important education is. Is there any way you could give some numerical rank of importance to the issue of education during your administration? How important is it once you would become, if you became governor?
Number one, and I'm not saying that to this audience to hear, I've said it throughout the campaign, I've focused on higher education, which I think has been neglected from a monetary standpoint, but education is the top priority. Education gets us out of poverty. There's been a lot of talk about the purported absence of poverty discussion in this race, and it hadn't been absent. I've been talking about it a lot. I think the key to moving people out of poverty is education. I think all of you in this room recognize that, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, and that's going to be the key for Louisiana going forward, and it's going to be absolutely my top priority. I also intend to begin the discussion about pilot programs in the Birth to 3 program. This is an area that I think everybody is recognizing is the real brain stimulation component of a young person's life, and we haven't focused on it yet. And that's not to say we create government programs to do that for everybody. I think what we have to do is pilot that and see how it works and see what kind of involvement we can get from the private sector. So I'm sure many of you are involved in that as well, and if you're not, I encourage you to take a look at that and make that your next challenge, is to try and see what we can do to make certain that young people, particularly impoverished young people, get that stimulation that they're not going to get necessarily at home, because there may be only one parent. You may have 2 parents working. They're not in an environment where you get you're read to, you're stimulated, that brain starts developing. I think we've got to be very cognizant of that as well.
And you and I both alluded to this, but Louisiana is leading the nation in terms of some of its choice options for its citizens, and yet here in the state, and Senator Duplessis knows this because of her work, we still run into parents who have limited access to opportunity, who want more options. What do you view as the biggest obstacles to growing school choice across the board throughout the state for those who want it?
Well, funding is the obvious answer. I mean, I think given the financial plight of the state right now, it's a real challenge to be able to expand a voucher program when the dollars are coming from the general fund and not coming from the MFP. So I think the biggest challenge is a financial one. And I think the second challenge is to making more and more people aware that they do have options and that there are institutions out there that have been developed for the sole purpose of trying to give parents an option of moving a child from a failing environment to one that's going to be a successful environment.
Any thoughts on how we could fix the funding issue? That's been, with the MFP and the scholarship program in particular, that's been particularly painful.
Yeah, you got a couple of hours here? The answer to fixing the funding problem is a very extensive one, but you can't fund this out of the MFP. I mean, that's pretty clear, and that was pretty clear from the get-go, I think. I know the attempt was made to do that, but it's unconstitutional. I don't think we're going to be able to get away with doing that. So you're going to have to find enough general fund dollars to carve out and say this is important enough to make it a priority, and I would like to see us gradually increase the number of scholarships that are available and the number of opportunities that are available for choice for parents who want to see their child succeed and want to put them in an environment where success is paramount and it's being recognized and achieved as well.
One other question. And our LFC chairman, Eddie Risponi, is a big proponent of workforce development. How important is the issue of STEM, which you alluded to, in innovation in this issue of workforce development?
Well, let me say, I sponsored the legislation that created the community and technical college system a number of years ago. We didn't have that system in Louisiana, and it's now flourished, I think probably beyond our expectations when I authored that bill more than a decade ago. And I think as it has evolved and we've recognized the significance of STEM education, we've also recognized the need to be creative. And this is one thing that's often missing in government, and that is creativity and the ability to think differently and try and solve problems in a different way. As you look at the workforce needs of Louisiana, it's very apparent that certificates and two-year associate degrees are going to provide the educational background for the majority of people we're trying to put to work in Louisiana, for the majority of Louisianians. So we've got to figure out innovative ways that we can train people for the skills that they now need. It's no longer brawn, it's brains that people need to be productive nowadays. And I think we've gone a long way toward achieving that over the course of the past several years. The higher education systems and the community technical college system, K-12 education, and the broader business community are now sitting down and talking about what jobs are needed in what areas and how we can focus educational training on real jobs that exist in real geographic areas of the state and make certain that we're providing those opportunities for people every chance we get. The Jump Start program, for example, which has given high school students a running start to an area where they may want to be in, has been a great program and I think needs to be expanded. And I know you're going to see much more discussion about this particular aspect of education because it's the key to training Louisianians for jobs that we know are coming our way. We're blessed right now, as we have been in the past, with more and more opportunities coming to Louisiana. $60 to $80 billion worth of economic development projects that are going to be crying out for Louisianians who are skilled enough and educated enough to fill those positions. And that's the challenge that we better be ready to answer over the course of the next 4 years.
Well, thank you very much. Give a hand to Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Let me just add a congratulations to my former colleague Ann Duplessis and thank her for the new role she has played in the evolution of education in Louisiana. It's been great to watch, and we missed having you in Baton Rouge. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks again. Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm very pleased to present to you our next candidate for governor here in this great state. Born and bred in Louisiana, Senator David Vitter has been a tireless advocate for his fellow Louisiana neighbors and has served them well by holding elected office both as a state legislator, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and a U.S. Senator. As a state legislator, David led the fight for term limits against great odds, and he won. And he fought against wasteful spending and the early release of violent criminals. In the U.S. Senate, the senator has emerged as a strong leader, advocating for fiscal responsibility and fighting for a responsible health care policy, which shall go nameless here tonight. I want to make sure y'all listening. A highly visible presence during the Hurricane Katrina tragedy, the senator fought relentlessly for hurricane recovery, protection, and coastal restoration. He has been a leading advocate for Second Amendment rights and promoting a culture of protecting life. Senator Vitter is an honors graduate from Tulane Law School, where he was an articles editor of the Law Review, earned an economics degree with the highest honors from Oxford University, and graduated magna cum laude. Some of us graduated o laude He graduated magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa from Harvard University. And not only that, he is also a prestigious Rhodes Scholar recipient. Senator Vitter and his wife, Wendy, live in Metairie with their 4 children. Please join me in welcoming Senator David Vitter. Good to see you.
Thanks so much, Kevin and Ann, and all of you for the invitation. I've really been looking forward to the visit. And thanks to the American Federation for Children and all of you who are so involved in the fight. And it is a fight, a very important struggle to dramatically improve educational opportunity for all of our children, because that is the key that can unlock futures for them and dramatically improve their futures, and with it, our future as a state. I'm running for governor to make a difference in where Wendy and I live, where we're going to spend the rest of our days. You know, at base, our motivation is the same as it is for all of you. We know we're going to spend the rest of our days here. We want to do that surrounded by our kids and eventually our grandkids. We want them to be able to live their dreams, achieve their great successes in careers and family, and have a wonderful quality of life right here in Louisiana. And that's why I want to come back home full time and take on this great challenge, building a team, want all of you on that team to really turn Louisiana around. We're in a ditch in a lot of ways. Obviously, the budget mess is top of the list in terms of what's imminent. But while that may be the most time-sensitive challenge we face, I don't think it's the most important. And Kevin, if I can sort of answer your question a few minutes ago, I think our most important challenge by far, medium and long term, is education, both pre-K through 12 and higher ed. Again, the budget is front and center. We're going to have to deal with that first because it is an imminent crisis. But education is where it's at in terms of really lifting the state, lifting opportunities for all of our people. And I'll have a consistent focus throughout my service on dramatically improving educational opportunities and outcomes for all of our children. I mean, quite frankly, most of our kids, for those of us in this room, have great opportunities now, generally achieve good outcomes because of our economic status. There are a whole lot of folks in Louisiana who don't have that advantage, and we need to give them the same fundamental choice and opportunities as we all have as parents and as families. Fundamentally, the biggest thing I want to do with regard to education is take what I would call the general pecking order of who's most dominant and powerful in educating our kids and turn it upside down. Now, what do I mean by that? I would say the current pecking order in Louisiana and nationally is the federal government is most powerful and intrusive and dominant, then state government, then local educational boards, organizations, school boards, or local government, then principals and teachers in the school, and then parents. That should be exactly the opposite. And fundamentally, I want to take that pecking order and turn it upside down and empower parents and classroom teachers and folks on the ground at the school. And everything I do with regard to policy is going to be with that fundamental goal in mind. As a conservative, I'm a big believer in local control of education. That has been an American tradition which in general I think has served us very well, and I support that. Certainly, I support taking power and authority away from the federal government and getting back to more state and local control of education. I fought hard for that in the U.S. Senate. But you know, the ultimate versions of local control is parental control, is leaders and teachers at the site, at a school that works well, giving them authority and control. That's the ultimate version of local control, and I'll always try to be promoting that. Obviously, supporting and expanding all versions of choice is an important way to do that because that fundamentally empowers parents and school-based leaders. And so I strongly support all elements, all versions of choice, whether it's voucher scholarships or the voucher credit program, charter schools, homeschooling options, all of that. And I want to expand that in the future. And I think that is the single most powerful way we can involve and empower parents and also school-based leaders. You look at any successful school, wherever it is, you're going to find a great school-based leader, often the principal. You're going to find great involved teachers, and you're usually going to find parents who are super involved, often demanding, often in the lifeblood of the school. We need to encourage that in all of our schools, and all elements of choice are a very, very important way to do that. We have a number of different reforms in Louisiana which have expanded choice significantly. But all of that is threatened in the near future, in my opinion. I don't want to be negative, but all of that is under attack by the public education status quo. And with the wrong leadership, either leadership that's 100% on their side, as my Democratic opponent is, or leadership that's simply not strong and proactive enough, those elements of choice and those gains could be cut back and back and back and back. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. And I can assure you, as governor, I will fight every day and ensure that doesn't happen. We're not going to retrench 1 inch. We're going to move forward. And if that means making these elements of choice a top budget priority, that's what I'm going to do as part of that effort. So with that, Kevin, I'd love to hear any individual questions and take it from there.
Let's give the senator a hand. Thank you so much. Well, as you mentioned, you did have the benefit of hearing my questions. I'm
Sure.
going to ask you some of the same questions.
Sure.
You alluded to, but what are the biggest obstacles to growing choice? You think you mentioned the education establishment. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, I guess my top answer would be a little different from Jay's. He's certainly right. In a tough budget environment, funding is an important issue and an obvious constraint. But I think the biggest threat is the old-fashioned public education status quo establishment that is completely against choice, completely against voucher scholarships and charters and all the rest for the most part, because it's a threat to them, quite frankly, because it is a threat to their normal way of doing things. That's the biggest threat. And the biggest threat moving forward may not be, bills that outright repeal these programs in one fell swoop. But I think, in contrast to that, it would be very easy with the wrong leadership, particularly in the governor's office, for these opportunities to wither and die on the vine. And there's going to be a very determined effort by the sort of folks I'm describing to make that happen.
And we've seen that in other states. And to that end, how would you fix that, or how would you address fixing that, especially in a way that would succeed your tenure? Because one of the challenges we've had with the current governor
Sure.
is he supported a lot of these things, but then we're all here tonight to see
Right.
if we can keep it going. What kind of things do you have in mind in terms of keeping momentum going past your service?
Well, I think the most powerful things that I have in mind involve leaders like you and Ann and others. Because what we need to continue to do, and you've started very successfully, but we need to continue to build a constituency for these choice options, not just among Republicans, who are most of the folks in this room, but among all Louisianians. And the most obvious constituency are the poor families who directly benefit. That's some of the most important work you all have been doing. And we need to continue to do that to build an active, excited constituency for those elements of choice. It's begun, because of your efforts, because of others' efforts. There are poor families, African-American families, others who are very invested in these opportunities because it's made a world of difference in their kids' lives, and they see it front and center. We need to multiply that, and we need to translate that into political success so that more legislators are invested, including from those communities, not just from Republican districts.
Yeah,
So that's the most important thing we can do. I'm going to be there cheering and working toward that every step of the way. But quite frankly, leaders like you and Ann or others are going to be more significant in getting that done.
You heard the Lieutenant Governor allude to the MFP, which has been a big challenge in terms of funding. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, look, if I had a magic wand, I'd love for these opportunities to be able to be included in the MFP, and I would support that. Now, obviously, that's a big hurdle legislatively. That's a 2/3 vote House, 2/3 vote Senate, vote of the people. But I would personally support it. Short of that, you need a governor who, even in tough budget times, is going to say, you know what, these programs, these voucher scholarships, et cetera, are not something I hope we can get to it, but are a top priority. It's going to get funded. And I'm going to have that attitude every step of the way.
And then the final question has to do with the issue of innovation in K through 12 and how important it is to workforce development. Paint a vision for us in your administration how you would make that happen.
Sure. Well, that's a very important question, particularly as we try to grow more good-paying jobs here in Louisiana. You know, the good news is we have some great jobs here, some great jobs on the way. High-paying, good jobs for folks who don't need a college degree. They may need a 2-year degree. They may need skills training short of a 2-year degree. And they can walk into, with the right skill sets, they can be 21 and walk into a $50,000 a year job. In 4 years with overtime, they can be at $95,000, $100,000 a year. That is a great life in Louisiana. And the first thing we need to do is say that, advertise that, and say there's nothing second class about that education. There's nothing second class about that life. And certainly, we need to start at least at the early high school level to communicate those opportunities to students and their families, and expand Jumpstart, expand skills training, expand all of those paths forward. In America, college should be available to everyone, regardless of race or economic background, but college isn't for everyone.
Right.
And you can be a first-class citizen and then have a first-class life with education that's different from a 4-year degree. And we need to really communicate that message very clearly. So I would be very focused on that at the high school years. My other biggest focus in education would be at the other end of the age spectrum, the very early ages, pre-K, 0 to 3, and early grades. I think we need to focus like a laser beam on basic skills in the early years and early grades. Right now in America, the percentage of incoming 4th graders who read at an appropriate level or higher is 34%. So think about that for a minute. So what does that mean? That means 2/3 of all of our incoming 4th graders aren't reading well. I hate to tell you, in Louisiana, the figure is 23%. And that means over 3/4 of all of our incoming 4th graders don't read well. Well, you know, we're so wrapped up in testing and PARC and LEAP. And listen, if only 23% of our incoming 4th graders are reading adequately, it doesn't matter what test you're given in the 8th grade. 3/4 of those kids are lost way before the 8th grade. And so another focus I would have is early ages, early grades, basic skills starting with reading. That would also include pre-K, 0 to 3, 0 to 4. And I'm looking at things like reforming and streamlining and hopefully expanding the school readiness tax credits, other programs to really enlist the business community, others to support that crucial effort pre-K.
Well, and thank you for your support of the scholarship program. Give the
Thank you.
Senator a round of applause.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I strongly support choice through voucher scholarships, charter schools, homeschooling options, all of that. Fundamentally, those elements of choice empower parents, involve parents, and that is a very powerful thing. The biggest thing I want to do overall in education policy is put parents at the top of the list in terms of power and control, followed by teachers and school-based leaders like principals, not at the bottom of the list.
This is obviously a gathering of people who are supportive of school choice, and I was asked to be here because they know that I am one of them as well. I think school choice has really given parents in Louisiana an opportunity to give their children an opportunity for an education that they may not otherwise receive, and I'm very supportive of what's taken place in Louisiana regarding choice, and I intend to continue that as governor.
School choice is part of a series of elements of a strong education system. It's extraordinarily important to give parents the opportunity to choose a school they would like their kid to go to, and to have that competition between the traditional public schools and the different types of schools that have, for instance, charter schools or voucher type schools, so that we have some real competition that kind of lifts the whole boat as we go forward.
This is a celebration of the fact that there are over 10,000 schools participating in the beauty of school choice. This is an explosion of opportunity for children and families that otherwise could be trapped in failing schools. And it's a shift in the paradigm. Instead of a focus on terms of what the system should be doing, this is a focus on making sure we give kids what they deserve.
This is phenomenal. I'm very excited about the outcome tonight. I'm very excited about the people here, the buzz, and people are very, very interested in learning more and understanding how they too can be a part of this whole ed reform revolution.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Yeah, so if you have questions, you should email us or go on our website at AmericanFederationForChildren.org or Louisiana for the number 4 children.org. Louisiana4children.org.